Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Aurum podcast. Once again, this brilliant, beautiful Saturday morning. We are so glad that you could join us today in the Aurum podcast, where we have a hot topic prepared for us today. I'm your host. My name is Tony Kuria, and I'm so glad that you could join with us today. Now, as you know, last week we were discussing issues regarding communication, and here at the Aurum podcast, we like saying that we want to focus on building winning teams. And the Aurum podcast is hosted by Aurum Consultants Limited, a human resource and risk advisory consultancy, which focuses on helping businesses, NGOs, SMEs, and others, and every type of corporate to build um, a, a most competitive workforce. And that's why we say our motto is building winning teams. Now, last week we began the conversation regarding communication, and we warmed up to the subject. And today we have managed to bring a relationship coach to help us deconstruct this better, especially in the workplace. So, with us today is first and foremost the managing director of Aurum Consultants, Madam Zipporah Kuria. Welcome, Zippy.
Thank you, Anthony. Good morning, viewers.
Yes. Also with us is the HR specialist, Madam Martha Thuku. Welcome, Martha.
Good morning, viewers, and welcome to the podcast from wherever you are. Thank you.
Yes, and now today our special guest. He has been here once or twice. He's a good friend of mine. I consider him also my mentor. Uh, Barnabas Achoki, relationship coach, but he's much more than that. Welcome, Bwana Achoki.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tony. Good morning, viewers, and good to be with you again in this wonderful, wonderful podcast. You guys are doing a wonderful job.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Barnabas Achoki also runs
Mhm.
a relationship consultancy. Probably, Mr. Choki could tell us, you could tell our viewers more about the consultancy that you run on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Anthony. We are big on matters relationship because we believe life is all about relationships. So we help people in terms of connecting with one another. We help people in terms of understanding their personalities and how they can work together with people of different personalities. Talking about building a winning team. Every team has different personalities, different people. So how do they gel? How do they work together? How do they connect and draw the best from each other? And so that's basically what we do, helping people resolve conflict, helping people know how to communicate, and to now we are even talking about having safe conversations.
Mm. Your consultancy is called?
Oh, sorry, it's called Two Ship Solutions. Yes, we are Two Ship Solutions. So that's the consultancy name. We are based in Yaya.
All right, all right. He, all right, all right, all right. I believe you can be able to see and hear me clearly now. Yes, so welcome everyone.
Okay.
So today we wanted to talk a bit about communication, and especially in regards to communication in a high pressure working environment. As you all know, the workplace is not, many of the times people use this example that the workplace is not a Sunday school, if you could put it that way. That the typical workplace is highly pressured, high results, high performance, highly demanding. Let's put it that way, highly demanding. And in those kind of environments, you'll find people don't know how do I communicate well. Probably you've gotten into a job, you've gotten into a workplace, you left corporate space and you're running your own business, or you're realizing you're running your business, you're a manager, and as demands and targets grow higher and higher, and results are required, especially in these difficult economic times, that the workplace has become it's a pressure cooker place, and you're wondering, how do we communicate effectively in such a situation without stepping on each other's toes, without coming across as a bully, and people losing their minds. You find that a clear and concise communication can help put everyone on track. So that's something very practical, very necessary. We have seen it again and again here at Aurum Consultants as we work, that uh, the need for people to communicate effectively, yet they are with tight deadlines. You have a diverse workforce. People come from different religions, people come from different backgrounds, different age groups, and there is bound to be conflict because somebody who is a generation Z, born 20, 22 years ago, is coming to work with someone like myself. Let me use myself as an example, who joined the workforce probably 30 years ago, and I'm wondering what's wrong with this young man, or they're wondering what's wrong with this guy. Why can't he understand me? So that is what we want to deconstruct today. So, Mr. Achoki, let me start with you.
Mhm.
From
Yes.
your perspective, on a simple way, how do we communicate under pressure? How should we actually? That's the question is, how should we communicate under pressure?
Thank you so much, Anthony. And I liked how you started. How do we communicate? So often
Yes.
under pressure, we tend not to communicate well. Under pressure, there is a lot happening, so we say things that probably we shouldn't have said. Depending on our personalities, we can push. So I like how you corrected it. How should we communicate under pressure? So again, and I like what you talked about, the pressure cooker. During COVID, we had a lot. We also work with couples, and we had a program called the pressure cooker effect, because couples were now all of a sudden at home, and the tension and the uncertainties, so things were boiling up. So it's also a high pressure environment at home there. So trying to help
Yes.
them navigate through the same. So how do we communicate under pressure? First and foremost is to know ourselves, so that we can then be able to first bring a calming effect. That's very, very important. Under pressure, always look for what is the best calming effect, that we can calm ourselves, then be able now to speak. Because in communication, you have to understand, why are you saying, why are we communicating, and what are we communicating? And so the how is what carries the vehicle that carries that communication. So why am I communicating? Because the goal is that people to hear you. So when you're under pressure and you are shouting, hurling insults, then people will shut down and block you and not receive what you're trying to communicate. So you the one who is communicating, should first and foremost calm yourself, so that then you are able to effectively communicate clearly. Because again, in communication, what is important is clarity. Sometimes under pressure, and I found myself even with my wife, I speak things that maybe are not even clear. My wife says I spit, you're spitting. You're not communicating effectively, you're just spitting things left, right, and center. So you need to first calm yourself. Emotional intelligence is very key here. Be aware
Yes.
of the emotions running within you, so that you calm
Yes.
yourself, and then make sure that the people you're communicating with also are calm. Then now we can be able to communicate effectively.
Okay. Okay. That is very powerful. That's a place where we can begin from. So let me turn to Martha. Martha, you've been in the corporate space for quite a while. You have dealt with being a HR specialist. You have dealt with all sorts of bosses who things are thick, and they probably need answers now. And there you are, you're caught between, as a HR, I believe you're caught between the people you're serving as workforce and the management that want things done like yesterday. And some of them, I'm sure you have dealt with people who are not exactly Christians. They use certain words that are not found in scripture. So, how do you, from your perspective, how do you suggest that we should communicate when under pressure?
Thank you, Anthony. And this subject is really interesting because I think when we're doing our schooling, it actually communication was a subject on its own, because
Yes.
then I think everything starts and ends with communication.
Yes.
Even not even at workplace, even with families. And as a pastor was talking, I just remembered how my dad used to be.
Mm.
Uh, when, like, let me call that pressure, when he's irritated about something and
Mm.
you could see he's about to act. he because he was this calm person, he'd put his hands at the back and walk to the
Mhm.
shamba.
Mhm.
And our shamba was a bit big, so he would walk all the way to the end, and he would
Mhm.
return like an hour later with his hands now not at the back, because I think he used to put at the back because he might just hit someone or pick something and throw it at someone. And you know the issues and the impact of miscommunication or not communicating effectively. You can
Yes.
imagine what results it can have. Yeah.
Yes.
and
Yes.
and we have seen, even in our nation, we have seen families banning each other.
Yes.
And I was looking at those things and I was thinking, this is just lack of communication.
Mhm.
We can bring mental health into it, but what went on before the someone banned someone, or what went on before someone
Yes.
killed someone,
Yes.
is because of they couldn't communicate.
Yes. Yes.
Now, just bring it to the workplace. And over the years, I've been in the workplace, especially in the bank. There was a lot of layers of bosses.
Yes.
It was really kind of hierarchical.
Yes.
Um, and for some reason, there were some bosses who were feeling like they really want to know them to be boss. And
Mm.
even now, wherever we are, there are some people who for some reason have that need to be recognized as a boss.
Yes.
And me, I say, if you're a boss, we know you don't have to remind us. And there are
Yes.
some people who wants to remind. And imagine those people communicating now when they are under pressure.
Mhm.
Um, you can imagine how that communication is going in the workplace. The
Mm.
person who is being communicated for, after that, it is very easy that the next place they are going is to write their resignation and leave.
Yes. Yes.
And that is why it is so bad for such kind of communication in a workplace, because you can lose very good staff
Yes.
just because of that lack of communication.
Yes.
For me, from where I sit, I believe that we can never agree like 100%. Tony, if you're
Yes.
my boss, I
Yes.
have my views. I'm an adult. I will look at things in a particular perspective. You are
Yes.
my boss, you are looking at it at your perspective. I don't think you should expect me to do things your way,
Mhm. Yeah.
because then you are not fair. Because I'm not a mind reader and I'm not a magician. I'll not be able
Mhm.
to read how you want it done.
Yes.
However, in coaching, we are told, let the person just do it and let
Mhm.
me do it, and then come and we review with you. And now you can direct me or coach me on how I could have done it. So you find most people apply on how they should have done it. And now it becomes a pressure kind of a moment. And that's a
Aha.
pressure that for me I'll talk about. Um, so as I said, it is okay not to agree on everything. Once you know that it's called agree to disagree, something like
Yes.
that. Once
Yes.
you have that,
Yes.
then try to understand
Mhm.
where I'm
Mhm.
coming from.
Mm.
So you undress your thinking and your
Yes.
way, and listen to me where I'm coming from, because maybe even if I took the long route to go to town, I'm still getting to town, isn't it? The only thing is you could have told me, oh, you got here, but next time try using this other shorter route. And then it is very important that even when you are responding to me after I have given you my view, resist the temptation of interjecting when when I'm speaking. But you should have, but you should have, but you should have. No, I can tell you, no, I shouldn't have. This is what I did. So don't tell me what I shouldn't have done. The other thing is to keep an open mind, because we are dealing with human beings. At home, you and your spouse, you're human beings. So this thing you guys are having pressure on, what is it that she's also an adult? The guy is also an adult. They have their mind on various things. And then the most important thing, especially for a boss, is to ensure that even during these discussions, you are not compromising. You know what you need delivered. And if I have used the long journey, have I delivered? That is the only important thing in that whole communication, miscommunication about things. And also looking at the bigger picture. So once you do that, you allow yourself to heal from all your insecurities and all your issues, and you just look at the bigger picture, so that once I'm done with what we are trying to talk about and communicate, then we can now sit together and say, okay, at the end of the day, this is what we need to do. How best can we do this? And that way you'll find you'll be more effective than communicating, because you are a boss communicating on me. Is it on me or at me? Than communicating with me. those are two aspects, and that's how I think I want to look at that issue. And I'll let Zippy also to chip in. Thank you.
Yes, Zippy, what's your take?
Wow. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Mr. Choki and Martha. And I think you've tackled this very well. And I like the analogy of, pressure cooker, because, pressure mounts. And when it mounts, what comes out of it is, it can be very lethal. And sometimes I think we need to just take a step back, especially when there's pressure around what we are doing, because we have to understand good communication is essential to achieving productivity. At the end of the day, I think if I am the boss, I have an objective of achieving something. If I'm the employee, I'm expected to achieve this. And when there's too much pressure, I think it's important for us to see how do we, neutralize this pressure so that work can continue. Because sometimes when the pressure is too much, you're not actually able to achieve much. I think sometimes the damage can be done a lot when we don't think around what's going on. And I like what Mr. Choki has talked about. You need to understand yourself. You need to be self-aware. I need to understand, how do I react when I'm under pressure? And how does my reaction affect the people I'm working with? Because sometimes my reaction could come from a place where I'm either shouting, I'm either using bad language, and I'm putting everyone in a situation where they are so uncomfortable. And like Mother is saying, I could end up losing good employees just because of the way I'm reacting under that particular circumstance. I think it's also important to be very specific and be very careful in terms of the language you're using when you are doing, the people you're working with. Again, especially when there's pressure, and even when there's no pressure, because sometimes communication can be bad even when there's no pressure, and we can use words that sometimes would end up hurting someone else, or sometimes words that would make someone become very insecure, and someone will end up not being able to perform, not simply because they can't perform, but we put them in a situation where they don't feel adequate anymore. So again, choosing the words we're using, I think, is very important. I think last week we talked about listening, and Mother alluded to that. When I'm talking, don't undercut me. And sometimes I always say we are all learning. So if I'm the kind of a person, when you're talking, I'm quick to interrupt because I want to say something. I need to be self-aware about that behavior and learn. so that I'm able to respond to you in an appropriate way. Again, body language, I think, is also very important when you're under pressure. You know, again, just going back to home, and mother and Mr. Choki has alluded to that. You know, when we are talking to each other, you know, what is my body language? Am I the kind of a person who will walk out and bang the door? Will I wake up and, like mother is saying, instead of putting my hands at the back, I'm picking and throwing things. The body language that, I'm portraying when I'm under that pressure also sends a message, because it's still communication, how I'm reacting. And I think the other thing I would say is also we need to focus on the goal. We need to focus on what the objective is. Yes, there's so much here, but what is the objective and how do we achieve that objective without killing everyone? So I think there's a lot to talk about in this particular area, but we need I think the simplest I can put this, I need to be self-aware as a leader that if I'm under pressure, this is the likely response I'm going to, to project, and how is it going to affect the people I'm working with?
Thank you, Zippy. Indeed, the three of you have given some very important points. Mr. Choki has talked about self-awareness, self-knowledge, and then the second issue is, why am I communicating? What is it that I'm passing across? And then thirdly, there is communicating. Martha has brought it up. Communicating with and not at the other party. The other party could be your peer. There are peers who think I should be bossing everybody around in this department, though you are not a boss. It could be you're speaking down on probably a juniors. You're a supervisor. You're speaking down at them, and even if you're a junior, you're a subordinate speaking to your boss, and you think your boss is not getting it. You still have to be very careful about the way you communicate with them. And then ZP has brought the issue of focusing on the goal. Why are we doing this communication in the high pressure environment? What is the purpose of what we are attempting to communicate all about? And then fifthly, non-verbal communication. That in that, somebody once told me, I think it was last week, we were saying that even not speaking is still communicating. Whether you speak or not, you're still communicating, whether you like it or not. Whether, like Martha says, her dad, Mr. Thuku himself, would fold his hands at the back and stroll deliberately away because he is feeling disappointed with something. He would stroll away. That is still communicating. As Martha has alluded, the family would know the patriarch is having issues in his mind, and since he cannot communicate verbally, unless he will communicate verbally and create a situation, he would stroll away, therefore communicating something by not communicating. And therefore, in a working environment, in a high pressure working environment, all these are very important pointers to discuss and to look at and implement. Now, the second question that is seemingly very obvious, Mr. Choki, this one I'm sure you've dealt with it a lot of times. How do we avoid miscommunicating?
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. Avoiding miscommunication, communicating, again, going back to communicating under high pressure. Somebody said, do not engage when enraged. Don't engage when enraged. Yeah, because you can say things that are bad. And again, back to what Zippy has said. Remember, communication is 70% is body language. Just how my body looks. As you enter the office, how you appear. That itself is communicating something. The other 20% is your tone of voice. So is it harsh? Are you loud? Are you shouting? So again, those are things that you need to watch. And then, of course, 7% is the word. But coming to avoiding miscommunication, it's very, very important to, number one, and I see this many times, there are some things that you don't communicate on email or via text or WhatsApp message. Just because it may be misunderstood. Just write the actual words. I may send you a text, Tony, and you are scratching your head. So what did Pastor mean here? What did Barnabas mean in this? But you see, so especially if it's a heavy communication, I need to be with you face to face, or at least call, so that I can hear you, I listen to you, as Martha was reminding us, and you're also able to listen to me. So some things, don't just communicate via text or via email, because then the probability of them being misread are very high. And so avoid that. And then again, going back to communicating under pressure. Sometimes that pressure is caused because you who gave the instructions wasn't clear enough. There's a time in the church, I made an announcement, and I just wanted to test myself. After the service, I went and asked 5 people, what is it that I announced? And they all gave me different answers. They were far from what I was communicating. So clarity is key. So even you who is the sender of the of the message, you the sender of the message, are you clear? Because so often we want to accuse the receiver because they didn't get it the way it was supposed to be made. But were you clear in what was communicating? Clarity is key in avoiding miscommunication. Are we clear? So sometimes it even means paraphrasing or what we call mirroring. You know, Zippy says, Mr. Achoki, I've heard you say, and she kind of like paraphrases what I've said. And then I can say, yes, that's what I said, Zippy. But I also said, so it can be a back and forth until by the time the person is leaving, especially if you're giving instructions, by the time the colleague or the person you want to do certain thing is leaving your office, they know exactly what is in your mind. Because sometimes we assume that you got what is in my mind by simply what I said, because I'm communicating it based on who I am and how I think, my thinking processes. But you see, you are a different person. So again, allowing for that differentiation. You know, in personalities, we talk about different personalities. You see, the choleric, the bottom line for them is what they're always looking for, what the big picture. So don't give them other things. That's what is important to them. So in avoiding miscommunicating with a choleric, I had a boss who was a choleric, and I had to learn to, when I'm communicating to him, I think bottom line, because that's what he's looking for. The other stories will come later, but what is bottom line? Because that's what he was. What needs to be done? That's a choleric for you. A sanguine is who are we going to do it with? And so the feelings come in there. Who is involved in the project as well? So those are the things that they are looking for. A phlegmatic like me, so often are looking at how are we going to do this, and then approach me in a friendlier way. So those are things that are important for that kind of a person. A person who is detailed then requires the details. So as you're communicating to them, you must make sure that you are giving them the details that they require. So again, being aware of the different people in your team, of how you're communicating with them is very, very important. And so also, yes, as I said earlier, being clarity is key, but also listening, because sometimes the miscommunication is simply because I didn't listen well. So often we listen with a bias. We listen with where we are coming from or who we are. Yes. And then also again, culturally, cross-culturally, culturally. I worked with an American one time, and you see, they can say this word, for example. They say, I don't care. This person will tell me, I don't care. Now, from an American context, I don't care simply means it doesn't matter. From my context, I don't care means it's a very rude statement. You're not caring. It's a rude statement. Yeah, but for them, what they are meaning is it doesn't matter. So again, looking at, and also with the different tribes, there are some things that for a particular tribe may mean something else for another tribe. So again, these are areas where miscommunication comes in. Gender, male and female, again, very, very different. Yes, very, very different. You ask a man, how did you feel about that? You've confused him. He doesn't know what that feeling is. But when I ask Martha and Zippy, they will tell me 1,000 things about their feelings. So again, gender-wise, so as a male, as a female boss communicating to male, the males are very logical. They want the bottom line. They land the plane. Don't come with many stories. For the ladies, they will come to the same point, but go through, like Martha was saying, they will go through the longest route possible to come to the same point. So again, these are things that sometimes happen when you're communicating. Be careful which gender are you speaking to, so that you are trying to come into that space with them. Where culturally, where are they from? Again, you talked about generation wise. Yeah, you see, our generation may see things in a certain way, where the younger generation see it in a different way. So again, how are we communicating in a way that I am sensitive to who I am communicating to? I think that's important.
Thank you. Wow. Oh, that's deep. That's deep right there. We've had different perspectives, and if you're watching or listening to us, and this is getting juicier, kindly post in your comments. I can see here Jonathan Wekunda. He's saying great learning opportunity. Hashtag Aurum. Thank you, Jonathan. Indeed, it's a very good learning opportunity. So if you're out there, you have a question you'd like Pastor Choki to handle. Probably you've seen some issues and you're wondering how does this work out. Or you'd like Zippy as the HR consultant, Martha as the HR specialist to give context to a question in the workplace. Kindly shoot the questions. We are live on Facebook. We are live on Facebook and YouTube. So kindly shoot the questions as we continue. So Martha, from your perspective, you've had, Pastor Choki say, like the way you described it, you're coming to the workplace, but you've used a long route to land where you are landing. And you're dealing with a boss who is wondering, why did you go to Ruiru? You left Buruburu to go to Ruiru, to go to Thika to come to Nairobi. And it is very simple. You take a matatu from Buruburu to Nairobi. So, you see, those are different perspectives. Those are different perspectives. So, Martha, from your perspective, you having handled the HR, being a specialist in HR, how, from your perspective, do we avoid miscommunicating?
Thanks, Tony. And that analogy, remember, even if I went from Buruburu to Thika to Ruiru and back, I still came, isn't it?
True.
The idea is we reach Nairobi.
Yes.
Anyway, having said that, and I have learned a lot, Pastor Choki, and it just hit me actually. In the workplace, we meet. You see, Pastor Choki talked about cultural backgrounds of people.
Yes.
Can you imagine in a workplace, we all meet in that? We are from different cultures, doing different things, but we meet in this one organization that has to succeed. Now, we can't allow that everyone comes to practice their culture. Tony, I can't tell you to do something when you tell me our culture doesn't allow us to do that. So for communication in a workplace, effective communication and avoiding miscommunication, I think one of the most important things is establish the culture that you want your organization to look like. And once you do that, please put policies in place that will guide. This is how we do things here. Like in my family, there's a way my dad had guided the way we do things there. Like for us girls, because my dad was blessed with very many girls, getting home after 5 was a no-no. And he was home and he sit looking at the front where the gate is to see who is going to. He is establishing that culture to make sure it stands. Yes. So you put your guidelines in place through policies, through SOPs, through practices, written practices. And then when you have done that, when new people come and join your organization, it is very important that you take them through an induction of how we do things here. So wherever you're coming from, you could have done things in a different way, but here, this is how we do things. So what you don't want to find is you go to an office. Like most of the places I've worked, we have had field offices. You go to a field office where you find all these people and everything wants to bring in what they do, A, in their culture, or B, from where they were working before. So you must be very, very, what is it called? You must be very clear on and concise on how this organization runs, irrespective of everything else you have ever known. This is how we do things here. Any change in policy has to go through the process of being checked and clarified. And then when we put it into the policy, we make sure everyone is educated on the new thing, so that we are all running on the same thing. Yeah, I think to avoid miscommunication is what Pastor Achoki said. Get clarification. In counseling, Zippy can say we did this class. We are about to graduate, Zippy, and we learned. We had a counseling class. It was in that, and we learned that it is okay to kind of repeat or ask a question. When you say this, do you mean A, B, C, D? Did you say A, B, C, D? So you're clarifying what you got, so that even when you're going to help this person, you yourself have an understanding of what they are saying. Because mostly someone could be saying something and then you get it wrong, and then you give wrong counsel, and then you mess up everything. So I forget the word they used in counseling to coin what the person has said, so that you understand. So always clarify what this person is saying. The other thing, and we have said earlier, don't come to communicate as if you are the one who has all the knowledge. So the organization is very rich. You will find people who are, we call them the Generation Y are still at workplace, Generation Z, Generation CG. Right now, I don't even know now the current Generation Z people what they are called, because then now they are not even millennium. Yeah, we are past millennium. We are in a new generation, and all of us are finding ourselves in the workplace. The beauty with that is that then all these strengths are in the workplace. And if you do not communicate well, you'll not be able to mine from each generation what they can offer. So the most you need that means of communication that is very clear. And that's why policies, practices, those things that are written are very, very important. In such a workplace, okay, depending on what you want to communicate, you need to choose which mode we are going to use. Last week we learned communication is passing on message, and it can be through various medias. So what is this that you are communicating? Think critically, which model should I use for this? Like the people who are in sales, they know how to sell their things. Are they going to use TV? Are they going to put people in shops? You need to decide which mode of communication that you're going to use to avoid miscommunication. And you know how expensive it can be. One time we were, I have worked with the NGOs for long, and projects keep coming and going. And every time a project ends, there's a possibility that some people will leave. And I remember communicating through a Zoom meeting that we are not going to release people. We are going to transition them to the new project that we had won. But then now, some people in that meeting had that we are going to release people. So that message I should have communicated in writing, in an email or something for everyone to see, because this girl resigned. And it's when we were doing exit interview, I asked her the reason for resigning. So she has resigned. She has given her 1 month's notice. We have recruited a new person to replace her. So I asked her during exit interview, why did you resign? You know what she told me? That someone in that, her friend told her that I'm going to the field to sack them. So she realized before I get there, she can resign.
Wow.
And imagine I had communicated through a Zoom meeting, but her friend had something different and now gave a bad communication, and this person resigned. Very good worker, but we had already recruited somebody, so we could not keep her because she's the one who chose to resign. And you can imagine after that, she took like 3 or 4 years to get a new job.
Mm.
So you see how miscommunication can be
Yes.
detrimental even to
Mm.
leading. So imagine if someone said that, if Martha said we ban the organization, so we could have found all the field offices burning because of this communication that came. So it's very important to choose the mode. For that particular communication,
Mm.
I went back to myself and I thought I should have written an email after. After I have verbalized it, then I write
Mm.
an email for everyone
Mm.
to see. Then there's some other communication that should not come from my level. It should come from the
Mm.
executive. So
Mm.
the context should dictate who and how you are going to communicate to avoid miscommunication. Thank you very much.
Whoa, whoa, that's a very practical example of communication that went askew. Somebody listened with a filter and understood it in a certain way, and somebody else acted on that filtered information. Wow, that's Martha. That's a very powerful example. Very true. Zippy, from a consultant's perspective, how do we avoid miscommunication?
Thank you, Anthony. I'm just listening to Mother, and I think the workplace is a very interesting place where a lot of times, depending on the weight of that communication, you have to carefully choose the mode of communication. And sometimes I've realized in the workplace, verbal communication can be misunderstood, can be twisted, can be. It's like what Mr. Achoki has said. You say one thing and people have had five different messages, yet it was a very simple message. So choosing that medium, I think, is very critical. But even before I respond to your question, Anthony, I'm just thinking about what really causes this miscommunication so that we can avoid it. And I think one of
Mm.
the biggest things that will cause miscommunication is assumptions. When we make assumptions, when there's no clarification, when there's no, information is not clear, um, and people are left to figure things out, and assumptions are made, is clearly going to lead to a miscommunication. And now we are trying to figure out how do we avoid this. When sometimes, just like what I've said, the wrong medium is used, it leads to that miscommunication. Mother has touched a
Mm.
bit on lack of context. What is the context? If that context is not clear, clearly is going to lead to a miscommunication. But just going back to your question, how do we avoid this then? I think it's also important to check with your team whether they have understood. You have communicated, check back, find a way of checking back to see whether
Mm.
this message that has been passed is understood for the intended purpose, so that you avoid a scenario where you end up losing a good employee because it was completely miscommunicated, they didn't understand, or you create a scenario where people don't see each other eye to eye because of a
Mm.
message that was passed and it was completely misunderstood.
Mm.
Um, the other thing I think is we need to be at a place where we don't avoid uncomfortable conversations. Sometimes I
Mm.
think when there's conflict at work, the easiest option is to avoid it completely. And you don't want to engage in that conversation, and we bury our heads in the sand. The truth is, in the process of doing other work, that pressure will mount and it will show up somewhere. So we need to find a way of handling uncomfortable conversations, and in a way that edifies, in a way that helps the other person. I think it's also important for us to choose the method we are using to communicate. And Mother has talked a bit about that. Is it an email? Is it a memo? Is it a meeting? How do we give the team an opportunity to give feedback so that all of us are getting to understand one another? Provide the necessary documents. Mother has alluded to policies. What are the
Mm.
documents that are guiding us? What are the supporting documents that will help us when there's a scenario? If we have an employee, with another employee who have, gone at loggerheads with each other, and they're brought to the HR office, and now you are having to mediate that. What is going to guide you? How are we going to mediate and, help these people resolve this issue? I've seen a lot of situations where a disciplinary issue is actually as a result of a conflict. And it's probably not even necessarily a disciplinary issue, but it's two people who have completely misunderstood each other. And of course, sometimes you find because the supervisor or the HOD has an upper arm, what happens? The employee ends up getting into a lot of trouble. And it was a simple misunderstanding, a simple conflict that needed to be resolved. So I think there's a lot that we can do, but we need to actually understand what is causing this miscommunication so that we can see how do we work around this so that we avoid, I don't know whether we can avoid, but how do we mitigate these misunderstandings that would come at the workplace.
Wow, our time is really gone, and I still had a third question that I wanted to tackle. I mean, this thing is so juicy. I'm sure I can see from the comments. I can see comments here coming in. Barnabas Achoki and others, saying great nuggets being shared. Indeed, Barnabas, some of the nuggets being shared are very deep. I've filled my notebook with some of the answers that have been brought. So I will ask the third question, and unajua vile wanasemanga, comments fupi fupi. So I would want to hear this from Pastor Achoki. Is it now, because we are talking about effective communication in a high pressure environment, from your perspective, briefly, is it possible to avoid conflict? It's even possible. Zippy has just mentioned it. Is it even possible to avoid conflict, in a high pressure working environment, and we're trying to communicate, like the way you say, Mrs. Achoki says, stop spitting, because now, it's reaching a place. You're talking so fast. Things need to move, and now it seems like she's wondering, hey, my dear, stop spitting. Is it possible to avoid conflict in such a pressure cooker environment? What's your take?
Thank you, Tony. And I think Zippy alluded to that. You can never avoid conflict, whether it's in a high pressure environment or just in a normal environment. We say this: where 2 or 3 people are gathered, there's bound to be conflict, as long as it's more than one person, because we are different personalities, we are different communicating styles, we have different preferences, with the different ways we look at things. So you cannot avoid conflict. In fact, I keep telling people that the Bible says that we should be peacemakers, not peacekeepers. And so many of us want to avoid conflict by keeping peace. But I realize that, in fact, sometimes the problems that we have in organizations is as a result of unresolved issues. And these unresolved issues keep piling up and piling up and piling up. Somebody told me a long time ago that conflict ni kama nyama. The longer it stays, the more it gets rotten. So the sooner you can, the sooner you can engage and resolve. Conflicts are there to be resolved. And that's why effective communication is important. In fact, just going back, the goal of communication, and Martha alluded to this, is not to agree. You will never agree. In fact, somebody said if you are 2 people and you agree on everything, then you don't need the other person. So the goal of communication is to understand. So it's for me to understand, where is this person coming from? Why did they do what they did? Just as much as I want them to understand why I did what I did. And that's how we then go ahead in resolving conflict. So it's understanding, and it's allowing the other person and knowing that they are different. They're not like you. They are different. They look at things differently. We have those who are optimists. There are those who are pessimists. So again, just seeing we are different. We are seeing things in a different way. And that's why it's important to empathize and try to understand, why is this person seeing this thing in this way, and then help them understand why I'm also seeing them in this other way. And in that, being able to, as Zippy said earlier, Things that we always want to avoid, be it at the workplace or even at home. We want to avoid having those difficult conversations. But those difficult conversations we must have. But we just have to have ground rules of how we are going to go about it. We need then to see how do we create a safe environment where we are able to resolve that conflict, come up together, co-create a solution at which we can then move forward and then see how that is working. Try it out and see how that works for both of us. Then we can agree to work together and move together, having resolved that conflict. In fact, so often, if we are able to resolve that conflict well, we end up even becoming better as a team. We get to understand each other better and flow together as one. It leads to greater intimacy if we're able to resolve conflict well.
Thank you very much, Pastor. That's very, very, very critical. Martha, what's your take as we come to a close?
Okay, thanks, Tony. And as we said earlier, that there'll always be room for agreeing to disagree. So your perspective and my perspective can never be the same. Even if you're my sister or my brother, we can never view things the same way. So it's okay to agree to disagree. I've learned from many years ago to flow. At times it's good to flow. The area that the conflict will go unmanaged is then if there is no leadership in that organization. So if we disagree, we need even to have another level where we can go and there's someone who is coming in and offering leadership that, oh, listen to me, listen to you. And then someone now says, no, this is the way we will move. That is offering leadership in the situation. Lack of leadership brings a lot of conflicts, and you find communication now becoming very, very bad. So managing conflict, having conflict is okay, agreeing to disagree is okay, but there's a place to ensure that still communication is going on. Thank you very much.
Indeed. Thank you, Martha. Zippy, what's your closing remarks, even as we conclude our podcast today?
Anthony, I would say conflict is a normal part of relationships, whether at home, whether at work. So long as we are interacting, we are working together, we will disagree. And the question becomes, how do we handle that disagreement when I am upset, when we have this conflict, and work still has to continue? And I think it's important for us to be at that place of, we need to just expect it will happen. At the workplace, it will happen. We will have conflict with one another, and we need to embrace it, but we need to come up with ways of resolving that conflict. I've seen organizations where they have a very well-defined way. If we have a conflict between the two of us, how are we going to resolve that conflict in a very structured manner? And where I will be able to come to you and state what the issue is, without adding too much drama into it, having clear facts. What is the problem? And how do I, feel about this whole situation, so that we can be able to start a place of conversation. Again, when there's a conflict, sometimes the conversations, and I think I talked about this, not avoiding difficult conversations. Sometimes the conflict can be so bad and you can't resolve it at the heat of the moment. I think it's important for you to say, you know what, let's take time out, let's take a break, but we need to revisit this conversation. So I would say it's a normal part of relationships, and we need to be able to deal with that.
Okay, wow. Today has been a very enriching conversation from Pastor Achoki, Barnabas Achoki. Thank you very much. You've really brought a perspective. I'm even contemplating, man, next week we probably need to have you here, because either next week or in this month of October, as we continue discussing this issue of communication. Why? Because we have, like I said last week, we have barely scratched the surface. There are so many facets of effective communication in the workplace that we could spend hours discussing this. In my mind, I was thinking things like, communicating at the right time. Because there are times when you communicate and somebody is thinking, no, this is not the time I want to hear that. give me some, at some other point, somebody else thinking. And then there are also issues like structuring and planning your communication. We talked about repetition and clarity, non-verbal communication. All these are aspects that can aid effective communication in the workplace, and especially during high pressure situations. So, to our viewers and listeners, thank you very much for spending your time with us. Indeed, we are so glad that you could spare your uh, Saturday morning to be with us. If whatever we've discussed today, issues regarding communication, you're thinking, I have a problem in my workplace, people are calling each other names, my staff are not getting what I'm trying to communicate with them. Probably you've heard what Barnabas Achoki or what Martha has spoken about conflict, people resigning, and you're wondering, what is it that we did that forced people to resign? If those are your questions, you have questions, you would want to get training, you've heard things that we've discussed and you'd like to know more, kindly get in touch with us via the contacts at the bottom of your screen, via phone, through WhatsApp. You can get in touch with us through LinkedIn, through Facebook, through YouTube, even through our website, www.aurumconsultants.co.ke. Get in touch with us and we would love to help you, and puzzle the issues that you may be having in your workplace regarding uh, effective communication. Having said that, our time is really past. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Pastor Achoki. Unfortunately, he seemed to have dropped off. Thank you for coming, for joining with us today. Thank you, our viewer and listener. Yeah, there is Barnabas Achoki. Uh, Thank you, Mr. Achoki. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Zippy, for the discussion. Thank you, our viewers and listeners, for spending your morning with us. Next week, we'll still continue having this subject. We'll look at it from a different perspective from what you've done today. So make sure to log in and check in and throw in your comments. And if you have comments even after we finish this podcast, while it's on Facebook, if you still have a question, type it in. We would love to discuss it and dissect it next week when we discuss the same topic. So till then, God bless you. Take care. Have a nice weekend.